final streaming mic check. 1 2 1 2. Coming through loud and clear on the speakers. Wallops Island mic check. 1 2 1 2.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a seat, if you could find a seat. If not, I do see some in the back over there that are free. All right. So first, welcome to Wallops Flight Facility. My name is Rebecca Hudson, and I'm the Community Relations Lead here at Wallops Flight Facility, and I am beyond ecstatic to have you here with us today. Launch days are the best day ever, right? And that's right. So I am very pleased to see such a big crowd. So typically, I am not the event MC. This is my first time doing that. So if I do a terrible job, just tell me I did okay, and it'll make me feel good. No, I kid. Our director of Wallops, Dave Pierce, is normally the MC. But if you have traveled here today from across the causeway, you can guess where Dave is. If you did not travel here, let me give you a brief thing. The message is it's awesome. We have so much incredible enthusiasm and support about what's going on with Antares and Cygnus today that we have blocked the roads. You heard of social media buzz when you break the internet? We have broken the roads here at Wallops. As a matter of fact, our visitor center where our public get to go view the launch, the parking lot actually filled in less than a half an hour today. And that's breaking any precedent we've ever had. We're not used to that. So anyway, as you understand, there is a bit of a backup, and our director is stuck in that backup. So I'll do my best to make up for it. Just to give you a little bit of a history here, so we have been here at Wallops for 75 years next year. I don't know that anyone knew that, but now you do. So hopefully you come back and celebrate with us. We'll have plenty of events all year next year to celebrate that. Just by a show of hands, I'm curious, how many people are celebrating their very first launch today? Wow, that's incredible. Okay, how many people have been to lots of launches but are still super excited? Equally as awesome. So anyway, for the newbies, let me give you a piece of a pro tip here. Hack your way through a rocket launch. Don't try to video it, and don't try to photograph it. There are professionals doing that for you, and you can borrow it as much as you'd like. The launch is so much better experienced with your own eyes and feeling it in your own chest and exciting. That's my pro tip for you today. You can thank me later. I can tell you I've tried to video a lot, and the more moving ones are the ones I don't even fool with video, and I just watch it. Anyway, that would be my recommendation. I do not see, I don't know if in the room, is Mr. Dale Nash in the room? He may be stuck in traffic as well. So anyway, we will bypass Mr. Nash. He'll come back to him. We are going to start off the show, and this is a little bit out of our normal order, so just please bear with us. And at the end of the presentation, I will come back and explain the exciting part about getting on buses and how we're going to do that. So anyway, let's start. We're going to start with Jennifer Comella, another wonderful NASA colleague. So let's give it up for Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Comella. I am with the International Space Station program in Houston, Texas, and I'm here to talk about the International Space Station. Next slide. Next slide. So, your International Space Station, this amazing feat of engineering has been in space. The first element went up in 1998, and we have been continuously manned for almost 20 years now. It goes around the Earth at a speed of 17,500 miles an hour, and it's around 250 miles above the Earth is the average. It weighs almost a million pounds, and it's about the size of a 5-bedroom house with 2 bathrooms and a gym. So the crew on orbit is a fantastic crew. We have 1 Canadian, that's David Saint-Jacques, 3 Americans, Anne McLean, Nick Hague, and Christina Cook, who has just been announced as extending her mission for another about 6 months, so she will be there close to a year. So that was announced this morning. It's very exciting to get great science from her extended stay on the ISS. And then we have 2 Russians, Alexei Avinchkin and Oleg Kononenko. He's the commander for this expedition 59. So we've had 59 approximately 59 missions, 6-month missions. Okay, the next slide. This is when they just arrived. The current new crew arrived fairly recently, and you can see folks were excited to get them on orbit. Next slide. So back last summer, early fall, the HTV, which is the Japanese cargo vehicle, brought a whole bunch of new batteries, external batteries, up to space station. You can kind of think of it as like the old school cell phones had nickel cadmium. These were nickel hydrogen. They're harder to manage. They don't hold charge as well. They lose charge faster. And now we have lithium ion batteries, which is kind of like, think about new school cell phones, less difficult to manage and much lighter and much more efficient. So it took 3 spacewalks to set those up, and so one of the cool places on the space station is the cupola. The cupola is, it's got windows all around and down the center, and that is where the crew likes to look out the window at our gorgeous Earth, not flat. And the crews also control the Canada arm from there to capture Cygnus. So they'll be in the cupola, commanding with that joystick-like robotics workstation. And our Earth friend came on a very cool and exciting mission for us a couple months ago, or was it a month ago? And that was the first demonstration mission for commercial crew. And this year we will be launching the first American crew from American soil since the shuttle retirement. So that'll be an excellent milestone and a very important step for the International Space Station program and for the United States. And that's David in the cupola, just showing you another view of the cupola. All right. So if I were in space, this is what I would do. I would look out at that all day long. That's the Aurora Borealis, and a view of the night. I think that's above Europe, with all the lights from the cities. 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets a day. So I think, though there could be some boring parts, that part would be the really coolest. So what are we launching on this spacecraft? And what are we launching it for? Well, first of all, we have a new capability on this mission. We are able to put science in very late, so right before we launch, within 24 hours of launch, it's actually, I don't know what we did yesterday, 20 hours, we were able to load live cargo and very time-sensitive science onto the vehicle. Previously, it was 3 to 4 days that we could do that, so now we have a lot faster, so that it doesn't expire as fast. Or it expires at the same rate, but we can get to the science faster once it gets to orbit. Also, got new cameras, an 8K camera going up. I mean, I don't even have a 4K TV yet, but we're already filming in 8K. And then, as you can imagine, such a machine requires a lot of spare parts and resupply for all of the consumables you use every day. Think about if you were having to use wet wipes to take a shower or all that stuff. So we bring that up for the crew, along with food. And let's see. Oh, trash bags. So this is important. This is one of the big capabilities that Cygnus gives us. Cygnus brings up great science and great supplies, but it provides an amazing service for us, which is removing trash. You can imagine if you only get to throw your trash out every 6 months, 3 months to 6 months, you kind of want it gone. So the crew's happy to see us be able to put a bunch of trash on board And unfortunately, the beautiful spacecraft does burn up in the atmosphere, but so does all that trash, so we don't have to smell it on the ground. Okay, and so astronauts, they're just like us. Not really, they're pretty cool. But this is Anne and our Earth friend. They're doing plumbing on the toilet. You can imagine with 6 people on orbit and 2 toilets, you really want both of them. So there's a lot of toilet maintenance. And then also we use what goes into the toilet to recycle and drink, use for drinking water on orbit. So that's also an important thing because launching water is heavy, and we've got to make sure we are as efficient as possible. All right, next. Again, astronauts just like us. They have to do basic hygiene, and they cut each other's hair on orbit. So who knew you had to learn to be a barber? That's David cutting Nick's hair, and on the end of that, that's a vacuum to suck up the hair because you wouldn't want all that hair floating around in microgravity. All right, let's talk a little science. The next thing on orbit, it's called the veggie. It is growing various types of plants, various mediums that the plants grow in, various ways to water, to try to see how we can grow plants and edibles for the crews, for future crews, for long duration crews. Because we don't resupply all that often, you don't get a lot of fresh food on orbit. So this is kind of the future. You can see different lighting. That pillow there is different medium. On the right, you can see that you can compare which ones are actually growing better than others, so that's part of what they do. Christina is there harvesting. This is wasabi that she's harvesting, and David is pretending to eat it, but it's pretty spicy. So they made a wasabi pesto with it, and you can see on that little cracker, wasabi pesto. All right, next slide. So, one of the things we're finding with all these missions to space station is, and we knew this from shuttle, but now we have longer duration, that the immune system is actually suppressed when we send people to space. And in this experiment called TARBIS, we are using tetanus antibodies to test the immune responses. So this is one of the things that's enabled by this new capability that Cygnus is offering us for the 24-hour load. All right, next. So this is a Canadian experiment. That's Nick. He is loading biological samples into the minus 80 degree freezer. We call it a Melfi. And we can store things long term so that we can get them home and study them at home. So we have 3 of those on board, and they're full frequently. And then we get a resupply mission that can return items home, and then scientists on the ground get to study that. So one of this experiment actually tests the long-term stiffening and thickening of arterial vessels, and that they see that the crews actually, their vessels age 20 to 30 years on orbit for 6 months more than it would have on Earth. So that's something we really need to study if we're going to send humans to Mars. Next one. So this is a shot of Cygnus on NG-10. That was the first flight of what we call the slingshot. The crew bolts on some deployers to the the outside hatch and closes the hatch, and the Cygnus departs. Cygnus then goes above ISS and deploys those satellites that are in those deployers. If you look at the middle picture there, that is the NanoRacks external deployer. They've been flying, I think, since '04. And that has several satellites in it. One of the cool ones is actually built at Johnson Space Center in Houston. That's called the Seeker. And one part called Kenobi will stay in the deployer and command this Seeker. Seeker will actually be kind of like a drone that goes around Cygnus and does inspections for us to demonstrate the technology of being able to do that kind of thing without, right now, if we want detailed inspections of space station, we have to send the crew on spacewalks, and that's a big deal. All right, next slide. All right, so what's next? This is a very cool picture taken from the ground through a telescope, and you can see a space station photobombing the moon. So what's next? The moon 2024, we've been tasked with sending humans and landers to the moon by 2024. That's a really short time span, but it's very exciting to be able to go into cislunar orbit and send landers down to the surface of the moon for the first time in a very, very long time. So it's very exciting. All right, so ISS is really excited to see Cygnus come visit us in 2 days. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you so much. That was awesome. I didn't know anything about the haircuts in space. I'd never thought about that, so it was pretty incredible. Hey, I don't want to steal our next speaker's thunder, but I wanted to give a shout out to all the students in the crowd that have actually built stuff going to launch today. How cool is that? And also we have... And I feel certain our next speaker will talk about this, so I will not steal his thunder, but I do want to definitely say hello to all the ThinSat students that are viewing in another location today. So, hey guys, and we're thankful that you're here, and we're excited to see your results from your work. So, our next speaker is the one and only Dale Nash from Virginia Space, and I will let him introduce himself and talk about all the awesome things they're doing. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dale Nash.
Thank you, Rebecca. I am Dale Nash. I am the CEO and Executive Director of Virginia Space Authority, and the easiest way to explain Virginia Space Authority is we're Virginia's version of NASA. And we own launch pads, we have a spaceport, we are building a payload processing facility, we have a drone testing facility, and we have 61 ThinSats going up with a lot of brilliant students here on this launch. I'll talk about that in a second. Next slide. There's Launch Pad A. We are very proud to be partners with NASA and Northrop Grumman, and that they launch off our Pad 0A. It's a pretty impressive pad, weathers the launch as well, and if need be, we could turn that thing around in probably about a week. Next slide. We're one of only 4 non-federal launch pads that are licensed to launch to orbit. In NG-11, this mission is the 10th mission to launch from the Mars Pad 0A. Next slide. So it'll be talked about probably a lot more, but we did some significant upgrades for the CRS-2 contract. Even though this is the last mission on CRS-1, we have proved that we can stand the rocket up, hook everything up, bring it back down. This is the Pathfinder, by the way, and put this mobile payload processing facility into over the cap, pop the cap, and change out the payload or do a late load, and it worked great on the Pathfinder, and it worked really good here on the processing. So, next slide. And we've completed all our maintenance, calibration, documentation. Our licenses are up to date. All reviews have been completed. Actually, all our work has been completed. Our crews have cleared the pad, and we are ready to go. Next slide. And ThinSats. We talked about the students, but students and parents and chaperones who are involved with the ThinSat here, please. If you don't mind. Thanks for some of you braving it here. We have 238. Most of them have not braved to come past the traffic right now. A lot of traffic and a lot of interest. But we have, I think, 238 or more by count here for the ThinSats. And what is a ThinSat? Next slide. So people say, what's your satellite? A 3U CubeSat's like a loaf of bread. Well, if you slice that in 21 slices, that's a ThinSat. You can see by the thumb and finger here, that's a ThinSat, and it's attached actually by a solar ribbon in between. So we will put up 63 of these on this launch. Next slide. And the ThinSat program is at its very core a STEM program to work with universities, high schools, middle schools, and get the students engaged and involved in very real space activities. They start off with a plug and play or a breadboard type satellite where they put it together, the sensors test it, make sure it reads on the satellite, maybe even run up on a local balloon. Then we get to the more sophisticated, the engineering model, which in some cases can fly, and we will run that up to about 110,000 feet. So it's at the edge of space, and test it out and recover it. And then the third is the flight models that will go and are loaded on the rocket right now. Next slide. And we just have an outstanding group here. The lead institutions, the way we do it is we have lead institutions who will again work with the schools in their area, high schools, middle schools. We have Northrop Grumman very involved. Kurt Eberly, the Vice President Program Manager himself of the Antares, is very involved in Northern Virginia. We have NASA Wallops, we have NASA Langley, Old Dominion University, College William Mary, the University of Virginia, Eastern Shore Community College down the road about 40 miles. Wise County Schools out in the southwest part of Virginia, about 6 or 9 satellites and about a dozen schools out there. Twiggs, Bob Twiggs, the co-inventor of CubeSats, very, very instrumental in this. So we're working with Twiggs Space Labs, but he's the person that really helped us get to this, as is Near Space, another group that we work with. We've got the Coast Guard Academy and the Naval Academy, and we are also putting up a 3U CubeSat with Illinois and Indiana and a NASA program called SASE coming off. So we've got a lot of extra satellites flying here. They will come off the second stage. Next slide. There they are. So loaded up in the firing order. The SASE 3U will go first, and then at about 10-second intervals, we will deploy the others. Next slide. And it deploys after we have gone up, the payload has separated. Once the separation has occurred, the second stage actually does a maneuver to avoid recontact and is pointing away from the Cygnus. At that point, at 110 degrees, so it's actually pointing a little bit backwards, we will begin to deploy after separation plus 4 minutes, 25 seconds, 35 seconds, 45 seconds. We hope to get a ping, a health ping, if it's in light. So as these ThinSats deploy and they're in the light, there's a burn wire that will burn. They will come apart, and hopefully we'll get a health ping. If not, we'll wait about 90 minutes and have another health ping and then start to download data. They're at the very edge of space. Next slide. Somewhere in the approximately 200 kilometers up, but between 100 and 300, they will deploy. So they're at the edge of space. They're anticipated to be up there about 5 days. So we'll get a lot of science, and we will not contribute to space junk. And there is some very real science going on this, not to mention the building of the satellites. And this is all sponsored by Virginia Space and working with the schools and the universities, and they put in the labor and the effort. But this is a big thing with Virginia getting beyond the ground but getting into space. And we are ready to go. So go Cygnus, go Antares, and go ThinSats. So who's up next, Rebecca? We just had some very distinguished guests enter here, beginning with Jim Morhard, our Deputy Administrator for NASA. Dave Pierce, the Director here at Wallops. And Secretary Valentine, for Secretary of Transportation for the Commonwealth. And my other boss, Jeff Bingham, Chairman of our board for Virginia Space. And well, I probably missed some others, but we want to recognize that we got through the traffic here and hope we all get back through the traffic to see the launch, because it's counting down.
That's right. Awesome. Thank you, Dale. So I do want to take a second to introduce our real MC, not me. Our real MC is our wonderful director here, Dave Pierce. Scroll with it.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry for being a little bit tardy. It's a lot like the 4th of July weekend going out to Assateague right now. But on behalf of the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center and our center director, Chris Scalise, it's my honor to welcome each of you here, our distinguished honorees and guests. Thank you for being here for today's Northrop Grumman 11 cargo resupply mission to the International Space Station. You know, during NASA's 60-year history, the world has undergone many changes. But throughout that, our nation has remained at the forefront of exploration and discovery, a testament to the men and women whose creativity, perseverance, innovation, and dedication make today's launch possible. It's a big day for Wallops, for Northrop Grumman, and Virginia Space, not to mention several dozen mice who arrived at Wallops yesterday via a first-class flight from Kennedy Space Center and are now tucked away in their little spacesuits atop the Antares. We want to thank you for sharing this important moment with us as we celebrate the mission to the International Space Station. You know, Goddard's Wallops Flight Facility support for human exploration started almost 75 years ago. And we're so glad to be a part of this historic day and part of that tradition. Today's mission showcases the incredible dedication, determination, and hard work of our unique commercial, federal, and state government team. I want to recognize our colleagues from NASA's Johnson Space Center, NASA's Langley Research Center, as well as our commercial partners, Virginia Space, with Executive Director Dale Nash, as well as Northrop Grumman, and our Senior Vice Presidents for Flight Systems, Scott Lair, and for our Vice President for Management of Space Systems, Frank DeMauro. Please give them a round of applause. It was about 25 years ago that we formed this partnership, and boy, has it been successful. We look forward to continuing our strong relationship with our commercial partners as Wallops serves as a key test facility for certification of commercial, scientific, and exploration systems as we get back to the moon. Along the way, Wallops will continue to provide real-world, hands-on science and engineering experiences to thousands of students across the country conducting science and technology research. So now, without any further ado, please join me in welcoming NASA's Deputy Administrator, Jim Morhard.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. Good afternoon. I had to check my watch. But, first, thank you, Dave, for introducing me, and thank you, Dale. I want to recognize a few people. First off, Representative Abigail Spanberger of Virginia's 7th Congressional District is here. Welcome. Governor Northam's Chief of Staff, Clark Mercer, is here. Welcome, Clark. Glad you're here. Virginia Secretary of Transportation, Shannon Valentine, is here. I've just spent about 45 minutes with her in a bus, so we're good friends now. Kelly Thompson, the Secretary of the Commonwealth, is also here. Welcome. The Ambassador of Ukraine, Valerie Chali, is here. Welcome, Valerie. But most especially, and I'll focus on the students that are here today, the research teams that make up a lot of the work that's going up today. And it really comes from NASA's undergraduate student instrument project. And I'd ask if, as I name the schools and consortiums, if you could please stand. The Virginia Space Grant Consortium. If you're in the room, could you please stand? Old Dominion University. These are students and professors and teachers. University of Virginia. Virginia Tech. Hampton University. And the 40 ThinSat teams from across the country. One of those teams is Dennis J. O'Connell High School in Arlington, and it was my alma mater, so I'm excited they're part of it. There's one other person I'd like to mention, and he may be here, he may not, but a gentleman by the name of Alan Cutler. Is Alan here? Alan Cutler is on the Senate. There he is. I want to mention Alan. Alan and I have worked together for years. And Alan is one of 4 people who literally write the legislation for NASA. Every single letter and word. And it is sleepless nights. He's given up weekends, days, vacations, everything for this organization. And he's done it for over a decade. And I would be remiss to not say thank you publicly for what he's done for this agency and what he's done for me. So thank you, Alan. It's really an honor to be here with you, especially with the students, because what pleases me most about being here is that I see in you those talents that are needed. Your future really has endless possibilities, and many of you will base that future on what's inspiring. And many of you will be the leaders in this field in the future. What inspired me were a number of things. One, when I was in 1969, I was with my father camping as Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. And it was a wet summer night, and we listened by the campfire to the radio. Neil Armstrong didn't claim the Sea of Tranquility for the United States. He claimed it for the world. Not for one country, but for humankind. At that same point in time, there was a young woman who heard that story, and she contacted me afterwards, and she said, I was living in India, in northern India. My father was in his 20s. Her name was Bhavya Lal. Her father was an electrical engineer who was working to electrify India in a remote part of the country, and they lived in a small town called Hardwar. They didn't have a TV, they didn't have a refrigerator, but as I was with my father that night, her father put her on his shoulders and took her to a nearby tropical forest. And as she explained it to me, she described it as a proper one with pythons, cobras, and mountain lions. That was not my experience. They went to a clearing and looked up at the moon, and her dad started narrating the moon landing, which hadn't even happened yet, but the mission was underway. And he really didn't know anything about it, but he made up a story for her about how the rocket took off and how Armstrong and Aldrin were landing and how they were bouncing around collecting rocks. She said that she listened with rapt attention, hanging on to every word. And today it's her favorite story about her father. She grew up loving math and science and attended school in Delhi focused on those two, and eventually attended MIT studying engineering. And now she works on space policy in the United States. The path for all of us in this room is not a straight one. So I come here today and ask you, especially the students, what's your measure that will make you a legend in your field, like Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin or John Glenn? I was 6 years old. My father was designing airplanes for the Navy. We lived in Arlington, Virginia. And John Glenn actually lived in Arlington, Virginia right after his orbit. And my parents, I don't know why, I don't think I would do this with my kids, but they dropped me off with my brother, who was 9, I was 6, in front of John Glenn's house, told us to walk up to the door and knock. I'm knocking away, and out walks John Glenn. And come on in, brings us into his house, let us pet the cat, gave us a glass of water, we got our autographs. But that was the first time I met John Glenn, and he was such a gentleman. 30 years later, I end up on the Senate Appropriations Committee, and John Glenn's a U.S. Senator. And my job is to appropriate the funds for military construction. So it's a $7 billion account. Well, John Glenn was the chairman of that subcommittee on the Armed Services Committee, so we worked together. And I regaled him with this story, and of course, I'm sure there were many people coming to his door, but we had a good laugh about it. But what was amazing about John Glenn was that he had a mind where if you fed him the information, it was like a steel trap. It stayed. Whatever you said to him, he was going to remember. And you can imagine for what he did in that launch, it was perfect. But it goes back to what is the measure of the person that becomes a legend? And that measure is what we do with the life that is presented to us. That measure includes developing the seeds of greatness that are in all of us in this room. That measure is maximizing our time on earth and providing the greatest good for the greatest number of people. It's a choice of your vision for the future, as well as what we're trying to do at NASA. My hope for you is that you'll be acutely aware of how blessed you are to be alive and continue to contribute to the greater good. And sometimes we do fail, but when we do, we've got to keep going. It's not the challenges that determine our lives, it's what we do with them. We all have setbacks. It's how we address them. Will we allow them to become who we are, or use them to slingshot forward? I say this because in 2010, I was in a plane crash. There were 9 of us, and 5 died. And it took 17 hours to get us out. I should have died 9 years ago. Instead, I'm NASA's deputy administrator. I've learned since then we all have a story. I've heard a few today that gave me chills, far more difficult than mine. The President and the Vice President have created a new vision of America's space program. That will be a new story. We enter a new era of space flight by creating one campaign across 3 domains. Low Earth orbit is the first domain, which is where Cygnus is going. The commercial resupply program was an early success in this effort. And that includes a critical role for Wallops and Virginia Space. Soon we'll be launching humans again on American rockets. And with the proliferation of satellites, low Earth orbit will soon be a space lane of commerce. We choose to commercialize low Earth orbit, not with the United States being a landlord, but being one of many customers in a robust commercial market. And as we see here today, our NASA interests are not in owning and operating hardware. We want to buy services. The second domain is the moon. By 2024, we choose to again land American astronauts on the moon. And one of those astronauts will be the first woman to land on the moon. This time, we're going for different reasons. It's where we'll prove out technologies and capabilities and science to make future crewed Mars missions possible. The agency's working on the details right now. This is going to be a sustainable, reusable architecture, beginning with a series of small commercial delivery missions. We'll use landers and robots, and eventually humans, to conduct science on the lunar surface. It's really the first stepping stone of deep space exploration. And it's all part of a campaign with international and commercial partners. This effort will serve to bring the free world together for the biggest accomplishment humankind will ever undertake. Our intent is to unify free nations, create economic opportunities, and inspire people like you to expand the human condition. We're in the early steps of this journey, and it includes a space launch system and the Orion Deep Space Crew Vehicle. They're really the beginning of a logistics tale for materials and supplies. They're critical to this program to expand our human presence of freedom beyond the Earth-Moon system. The Space Launch System, also known as SLS, is going to provide the highest ever payload mass and volume capacity of any rocket ever made. It's critical for exploring the solar system, but it's much more than that. It's about determining what type of peace we'll have in space. Based on our values, it's up to us to make that peace. This is not an easy journey, but it's a worthy one, and it's one we must take. This is the world's most powerful rocket and the only deep space crew vehicle that'll take us to the moon's south pole. The third domain is Mars. Why do we go to Mars? Because who positions themselves to get there may be critical to who leads the world in your future. In the meantime, just in the last year, we saw the Opportunity mission on Mars end. This was a mission that was supposed to last 90 days. It lasted 15 years. Curiosity has told us that the building blocks of life are on Mars. I'm not saying there's life on Mars, but we do know there's liquid water below the surface. For research purposes, Mars 2020 will fly a helicopter off the surface of Mars, and Mars Sample Return will bring back samples to study in preparation for landing on Mars. And to get there, we need to protect our astronauts from the hazards of extended radiation, being a 7 to 9 month journey. That's why we sent the Parker Solar Probe to study the sun. So to the students, it's my hope you choose to never give up. My hope is that you realize how precious your life is. Get up every day and be thankful you're here. I can tell you I am. Have courage and be humble with your wisdom, because the person who exudes grit, discipline, and determination will enjoy successes never imagined. We need to maximize our time here, pursuing the endeavors each of us have chosen. I'm not offering it's going to be easy, but you're part of something much larger than yourself. I just ask you to consider a holistic approach to your life. It'll take far more than your field to be successful. What I'm saying is practice honesty, integrity, kindness. In our current culture, I urge you to disagree without being disagreeable. It's possible to compromise without compromising your values. Listen to others and find the best in them. We have a choice on how we move forward as a country. Each of us can take the best of life or the worst of it. I hope you take the best of it. I hope you'll be a legend in that field you're thinking about. And I hope you're proud of what you do. And if you're not, I hope you have the courage to change. Together, we're forging a new exploration campaign and new science. Know that it's not going to be easy, and that life's not fair, and you will fail through all this at times, but don't give up. These challenges are within our abilities. I've seen it personally. You will go places you've never imagined. So as I stand before you humbly and as we lead the world in science and in space, we join the other free countries to go forward to the moon, not because NASA and its partners do what no one else can, not because it's to our advantage to do so. We do it because we strive to better the human condition of all people on Earth. That's why we're here. And so I ask you to be your own author, to discover your native energies, to grow and to hope, and to accomplish what's needed so that we build a better life, not just for Americans, but for all people who want to work together. It's a challenge we again have accepted, and it's one we will win. We are all NASA in this room. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Now I'd like to, it's my honor to introduce Jim Reuter. Jim is the Acting Associate Administrator for the Space Technology Mission Directorate at NASA.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate being invited to come here. It's a pleasure always to experience the Chincoteague hospitality. It's an awesome place. At Space Technology, we have the pleasure of developing the transformational technologies that really drive us. We know that it's technology that drives exploration, and it will be, we're excited about our role of enabling the boots on the ground on the moon by 2024, a sustainable presence by 2028, and then on to Mars. And in doing so, we know that the ISS is the best platform that we've seen many times to develop the technologies and demonstrate technologies that we feed forward to the moon and then on to Mars. And that's enabled by Northrop Grumman's supply capability. That's a marvelous capability for the nation. We've got some great examples today that I'll talk about of technologies that are on this flight. Astrobee and bionutrients that are really enabling for us to carry forward in exploration. And soon, we know that just like we're using ISS right now to feed forward to the moon, we'll be using the moon as a test bed to feed forward to Mars, and we're excited to be there. So first of all, I want to talk about the Astrobee flight demonstration on this flight. It's a really cool system. There's a free-flying robot system. It really is a precursor to doing exploration at the lunar presence, because, for example, it helped the Gateway crew, and then when oftentimes on the Gateway it'll be untended, so it'll be an operational presence there, a free flyer that can be ground, that it really extends our crew and extends our ability to operate in untended operations. Astrobee has 3 flying robots, plus a docking station where power charging, communications and data, and capability to add experiments to it. On this flight, we have 2 of those 3. Their names are Honey and Bumble. Queen is coming later. Their sister is coming later on another flight. And Astrobee is really carrying on what's now a 12-year tradition. Its predecessor is called Spheres, and it has been on ISS operating since 2006. So what Astrobee gives us is really a greatly enhanced capability, substantially increased autonomy capability, so much better support for guest science. There's cameras, robot arms, and it can be an eyes and ears really for the station, monitoring environmental conditions like air quality, sound, and doing routine chores with an RFID device, locating items, that sort of thing. So it's just an all-around tool to assist the crew and the ISS operations. Astrobee can be operated either from the ground or by the crew. And as one example of the types of experiments you can do with it, it's hosting the ISS National Labs Zero Robotics Competition for middle and high schoolers across the world, as an exciting thing that will be coming up. Astrobee was developed by Ames Research Center out in Silicon Valley. It was developed under our game-changing development program. With game-changing, we try to solve significant problems by developing transformational technologies. The second technology demonstrator that we have on this flight that I want to talk about is bionutrients. And when you look at extended duration exploration missions, whether it's at the moon or onto Mars, there's likely a need for a method of producing nutrients when needed on demand. And so what bionutrients is doing is demonstrating a potential solution to that, getting microorganisms to produce nutrients on demand. And so what we're doing here in this demonstration is we're taking a safe organism, in this case it's baker's yeast, and modified it to produce essential nutrients. What it's producing it will be producing is antioxidants, usually found in vegetables, healthy eyes, beta carotene and zeaxanthin. This is a demo that's scheduled to last for 5 years. The astronauts will not consume anything that's grown, but what they'll do is what we're doing is bringing samples up on this mission. They're in a stasis state, and periodically we'll activate some of them over the 5-year period. And so the way to activate them is to first hydrate them, then you incubate, warm them up basically, they grow, you freeze them and bring them back to Earth for examination. It's really got a capability here on Earth too, as you can imagine, in remote areas on Earth where if you have a need for nutrients and medicine. So we think we can pay it forward as well. And once again, that's an Ames Research Center development that we're excited to have under our game-changing development. And then finally, I want to talk about, we're proud to sponsor many payloads using the MISSE platform. MISSE stands for Materials International Space Station Experiment, and basically it's a platform to do long-duration materials testing on the ISS. We have 7 technologies on this particular flight that really are taking advantage of long-duration exposure to the environments. One example is electrodynamic dust shield experiment, which really, as you might imagine, is something directly usable or need for when we're on the lunar surface. By using electrostatics, it basically can avoid dust or help mitigate dust conditions. We also have a 3D multifunctional ablative thermal protection system experiment. This is a material that's used in Orion for the compression pads. And so what we're doing here is gaining a long-term exposure of the materials to further validate the robustness of the Orion design. And we also have a variety of other materials that would be for spacecraft, habitats, landers, things like window materials, radiation shielding, and solar sails. And one of those in particular I want to highlight is an Oklahoma State University radiation shielding experiment. This was supported through the EPSCoR project, and so really exciting time for them. So in summary, I really show my appreciation for the ISS program and to Northrop Grumman, because it's your capabilities that are enabling technology which is driving our exploration. And so I look forward to a great launch. Thank you.
Are you ready to rumble? All right, I got rid of the introduction. I said I don't need one. That's me at the bottom there. We are Northrop Grumman, and we are proud to be back on the Space Coast in this launch city, in this launch state, as your Virginia-based launch company. Rick Mastracchio is going to be helping me. He's going to talk about the Cygnus in a little bit. So we're your Northrop Grumman team to take you through what's going to be happening today. Now, I was told to be a little bit straighter. Anybody who's been here with me before know I can get a little crazy. We're not going to do that. So if you were here last time and we sang choruses of Antares, we're not going to sing this time. I was told, no, I have to. So I got my order. It's supposed to be very good and very straight. 35 years in the Air Force. I understand the concept of an order. I just was never good at following them. Okay. So with that slide, please. I want to focus just on a rocket named Antares, 15,000 pounds. It does carries. It will take your grub and mice in a tub and meet you up in the stories. So that was just to drive my communications people nuts that told me not to do that. Slide, please. Okay. I do want to take a moment to thank these folks. We had a lot of briefers. They went through fairly quickly. But we have our sponsors here that are making this possible. The Wallops Flight Facility does an awesome job of providing the facilities they described, the vision of Virginia Space that brought Antares, and Minotaur, our other launch vehicle that will be launching out of here in the next year or so, the Mars. Boy, the Chicotee Police, they must love us. We have messed up every street in town. They do the escorting, they do all the blocking, and they actually clear the facilities for the launch hazard area so that we're able to launch. We're in the center here, and the people of the local community, whenever you're out here going to lunch, going to dinner, are we going to launch? Is it all good? And they track it. So great community support, and we offer our thanks. Slide, please. Okay, let's talk about the launch vehicle itself. 14 stories tall, 13 feet wide. Okay, weighs in at just under 700,000 pounds. All right, we've already talked about the commercial resupply missions that we're a part of. The fairing, it's classified as a 4-meter fairing for those of you that are space junkies, but you can see the size of it, 32.5 feet long. If you think about a full-size F-150 pickup truck, that's about 18 feet long. So if for some reason you wanted to launch a brand new F-15 or F-150 or maybe an electric car into space, you could do that. I don't know why anybody would, but technically you could launch a vehicle into space. That's only a joke for those of you that know what I'm talking about. Little friendly competition never hurt anybody. All right, stage 2. Stage 2 is a solid rocket motor. So think of about 120,000 pounds of just fuel waiting to explode. That's what's in stage 2. It gives 65,000 pounds of thrust when it's working. It's got a great nozzle, it can direct, it can steer, and that's what we'll talk about as part of the mission set. And then our stage 1, this is a liquid-fueled rocket. It's time for Jeopardy! Alex, I'll take high school chemistry for 100. Very good. This is your question. I am the missing element that, along with a fuel source and ignition source, makes fire. In the form of a question, please. What is oxygen? That's right. It was right on the slide in case you weren't really paying attention. So you've got to have oxygen for fire. So this great big vessel here, the majority of the rocket, 400,000 pounds of oxygen. First, when you get up to space, there's none, so it's good to bring your own. And second, we need it at the quantity and the richness of pure oxygen to be able to shove in with the fuel to get the explosive power that forms the thrust that allows us to push the rocket. So we carry 400,000 pounds of oxygen. And then we have about 160,000 pounds of rocket propellant. That sounds cool, doesn't it? Okay, who knows what rocket propellant is? Oh, there's the answer. Say it loud. Kerosene. Why don't we call it kerosene? Because kerosene. That is not cool. Rocket propellant. That's cool. And there's a rumor out there about NASA, I can't verify if it's true, but during the 1960s, you guys tried to go get money to study kerosene. And Congress said, we're not putting money into kerosene because we've been around for 100 years. So they scratched out kerosene, resubmitted with rocket propellant, and they got all the funding they need. I don't know if that's true, but I like to tell the story anyway. All right. And as you heard, this is the largest payload capacity we've taken up to the International Space Station. That's enough. Slide. Okay, we talked about the, this is a paid commercial, by the way. NASA paid for this commercial. So we are the commercial resupply. We're about, this is our last flight of CRS-1. CRS-2 takes us on into the future. And there are 2 companies that participate in this, us and the friendly rivalry I just talked about with SpaceX. Right? So they carry a little less cargo because their ship is heavier because it re-enters. So experiments that are taken up that have to come back down to Earth, they do that part. We're a little bit bigger, we take more weight, but we don't return. We take out the trash, okay? So we talked about the food, the water, the experiments, the clothing, everything that goes up to the station has to come back down. Yes, the food and water comes back down, processed. All right, we'll just talk about that way, okay? And so we burn that up. So that is part of the mission set. The importance of the 2 providers became evident about 4 years ago. Then Orbital ATK blew up on the pad out here. Okay, so people sitting where you are had a big show. We don't want that show, but they had a big show. All right? So we went through a re-engining. The first stage engines are all brand new right now. And then just as we were about to refly, unfortunately, SpaceX down at the Cape blew up on the pad. And so we had to carry the slack then for the mission sets and cargoes that they were going to be able to take up. So it's important to have the two vendors. Both have different mission sets, but can be redundant in the need and what they carry. So a big deal to have the commercial resupply. It's worked out good for the country and for NASA. Slide, please. Oh, yes. You know, Hollywood's watching this launch. They're studying it a little bit to try to figure out how to do things. And I was always told, never work with animals or kids. So could you make him go away, please? Thank you. All right, slide, please. I heard there's mice on this flight, but I can't verify it. We did talk about both the secondary and the tertiary satellites. So CubeSats, just think Lego blocks. They're 3 by 3. You put them together, you get a little bit bigger. It's 6 by 6. Then it's 9 by 3, and you can. This is what a dispenser, and it just pops out. You know, and you can have one pop out, or 2 or 3, and you can make one that's 2 by 3 and have a big 9-inch by 6-inch CubeSat. Very cool. Do lots of things like Lego blocks. And the ThinSat. That's about 4.5 inches. We in America always love to put centimeters on the slide. It makes us think we're really smart, but nobody understands it. So it's about 4.5 inches wide. All right, we've talked about in the previous briefing. Next. So the late load. This is the first time we've done late load out at the pad. So in the previous, we were doing about 48 to 72 hours ahead of time. And there are a lot of experiments that are too perishable for that. So they came up with this mobile processing facility that hooks up to the rocket. It has this big bladder that seals and lets them get a nice airtight seal that lets us put in the late loads that we had and were described in a previous briefing. Slide, please. Okay. The nose tip of the rocket actually comes off. We can just slide across. They slide in there and they put the late cargo in. So Rick, astronaut, he's done it. You've seen those on all the movies. You've seen them where the astronauts do that astronaut walk out to go get on the spaceship, right? So we had that this morning. We had 40 mice that then walked across this little rail. It would have been more impressive, but their legs are really short, so you couldn't really quite get that. I'm not sure that's what NASA already did, but it's a better story than the real one. Okay, slide, please. All right. So now let's talk about what we're going to see today. It started yesterday at the Launch Readiness Review. And all of the vendors, all the contractors, but all the range, the people who do the weather, all the folks that have to support the launch had to stand up and say, we are ready, this is how we know, we're good to go. And at the end, you just say, hey, we're go for launch, right? And they present that to the local NASA administrator, who then has to give the authorization as the range owner, the one responsible for the safety of all the people that live around here, and be able to say, yes, we can proceed to launch. All right? We continue to give them updates on the staging and the activities that went on. Then at T-minus 6 hours, we took the console. We being all of the people involved in the activity, Northrop Grumman to launch the rocket, the people in the range to provide the safety, the tracking of the telemetry, and all of those things. That countdown is going now. I keep checking my phone to make sure that there's no update that I need to tell you about. When we get to T-minus 1 hour and 30 minutes, we're going to start flowing the fuel. So we're going to pump 400,000 pounds of oxygen. We're going to pump 162,000 pounds of rocket propellant into the rocket. We're going through all the checks, through all the transmitters, the transponders, the radios. All of those things work. Is the system ready to go? That's going to count down. When you're out there, you'll hear the countdown net. And all of a sudden, at about T-minus 18 minutes, you're going to hear hold. And you're going to go, oh, man, they're not going. No, that's a built-in hold. That's when everybody says, stop. Take a breath. Has anybody got anything you haven't told us about? Let's think about this. Let's relax for a minute. Are we good to go? And you also go to the bathroom during that time. All right? You do. All right. So then we pick up count about 10 minutes. All right? Cygnus is going to go on their battery power. They're going to check out all their systems on the battery power to make sure that they're good to go. T-minus 5 minutes. The rocket's going to go to battery power. We're going to do the same thing. Is everything ready to go? And now you're going to hear this countdown net going, signal 1, ready, 2, ready. It's going to be these chipped responses back. There's only time to look and respond. We're going through so much data in that time. T-minus 3.5 minutes. We're on auto sequence. The rocket's going to launch itself. the checks that it's going through, the things that have to verify are so fast that a human can't keep up with it. The rocket's going to do those checks. We can stop it. We can stop it all the way up to the actual T0 time. But the system is now taking the rest of the launch countdown now. And that takes us to now. Okay, so this is the launch profile. So at T0, you're going to go, and nothing happens exactly at T0 that you're going to see, okay? It's a pyrophoric reaction. Yeah, we're back to chemistry again. All right, so everybody seen all the steam and stuff, the mist that's on the stage for actors or for singers and concerts? Okay, that is dry ice hitting water and the vapor just goes crazy. Maybe in your chemistry experiment or chemistry class, you had a crazy instructor that took zinc and put it in hydrochloric acid, and it just went nuts, right? So a pyrophoric reaction is when you take this chemical, which is an iron sulfide, and you put it in the presence of oxygen, it doesn't like it, and it just erupts. You put it in pure oxygen, and it goes crazy. You put it in pure oxygen with a constant flow, and it's trying to explode. And into that, we then dump the kerosene and a whole bunch more oxygen. That builds up in the combustion chamber into this enormous pressure, and there's only one place to go, out the nozzle. And so that's where you get the thrust that will launch the rocket, right? So that thrust is building up from T0, plus 1 second, 2 seconds. At 3.5 seconds, we're at about 40% power. That's enough for the rocket to stand on its own. All right, and this is where I need your help. So every time I go like this, I need you to go bam, just like the chef, all right? Bam. Okay, because we have so many explosions on this rocket to make things happen at the right time. So at T plus 3.5 seconds, we have 4 giant clamps that have been holding this rocket as it's trying to get away. 8 explosions happen, 4 on each of these giant clamps. It allows them to break loose, open up, and the rocket is now free to go. We're thrusting from 40% to 60% to 80 to 100%, almost instantaneously as the rocket then lifts off. So that's where we're going to see it lift off in about 3.5 seconds. So as we be sitting there in this big steam ball, this big fireball you're watching, you go, oh, is that bad or is that good? It's good. Now, if it's still doing that at 5 seconds, it's bad. And if it gets really bad, this is what you do. You go, oh, man, and then go, oh, yeah, Terry said, plug my ears and turn around. Okay? Because the sound's going to come first, and then all the dust and crap's going to come. All right, so we're not going to have that happen. But just in case. All right. So the main engine now, stage 1, is going to be going, and for 3.5 minutes. At the end of 3.5 minutes, we are now at 8,500 miles an hour and about 60 miles up. All right. Main engine will then cut off. All of the gas is gone. All of the oxygen's gone. That thing's just dead weight. We don't need dead weight anymore. So we're going to cut it. We're going to set off 2 big explosions that are going to ignite a ring of explosives around the whole rocket. That ring is embedded into the metal casing. It's going to split it open, rip it open, so that the stage can fall away. And the stage is going to fall away. Momentum, inertia are still carrying stage 2 and Cygnus up into the sky, right? But the fairing, we're now in outer space. We don't need it. Who saw the movie The Martian? Yeah, thin atmosphere. We don't need no stinking nose cone, at least in the movie. How did that work for Matt Damon? He got knocked unconscious, right? He couldn't deal with the pressure. Imagine the depth and the thickness of the Earth atmosphere. You got to have a fairing. It protects the rocket as you're going up through. It protects the payload. It keeps it from all the heat that it gets. But we're in space anymore. We're in space. We don't need it. So, a big explosion. We're going to cut the whole rim around this whole thing, open up like a clamshell. You're out of here. We don't need you. This ring here, this ring connects the first stage to the second stage, gives something for the payload. It's dead weight. We're going to cut that away. We don't need it. All right. So at 4.5 minutes, depending on where the sun is tonight, we may be able to see it because it's going to be behind us. We'll see. So, but we're going to ignite stage 2. 65,000 pounds of thrust. And it's going to start to burn. And it's going to burn until T plus about 7 minutes. All right? At that point, we're going 17 17,000 miles an hour. That's how fast the space station was going. We just heard that, right? So why are we going 17,000 miles an hour? Why does the space station do that? So it doesn't fall, right? So a little science here. If I take a baseball and I throw it, it goes pretty straight until gravity begins to pull it down to Earth, and it sags down and it falls and it bounces, right? That happens to stuff in orbit. It's just if you're going 17,000 miles an hour, you're falling, but you keep missing the Earth. You keep falling off the Earth. And so we're in a constant fall, but that constant fall at 17,000 miles an hour means you never land back to the Earth. If you slow down too much, badness happens. All right? So that's why we say it's 17,000, because that's the right speed at the 200, 250 miles above the Earth to stay up there. All right. So now we are done with stage 2. Its work's done. It's time to separate Cygnus and send it on its way. So, oh, suckers. It's a spacecraft. You don't BAM spacecraft. That's bad. I mean, they're pretty robust, but they're not that robust. No, some clamps open, and we push it away with springs. All right? Bam. What are you doing? All right. And so then stage 2 does the maneuvers you heard about to back away and make sure that it's not going to recontact on the Cygnus. We'll let Cygnus get out of there before we start kicking off a bunch of CubeSats and slide. Okay? So then we'll be on our way to the International Space Station. I think we actually introduced everybody, so I don't have to do that. That's very cool. So, except for the 44 new astronauts that will be going up. And yes, for you purists, please don't come up and tell me it's a gerbil. I know it's a gerbil. I couldn't find a mouse in a spacesuit. I don't think they get spacesuits anyway. I made that part up too. All right, I think that's it. So slide. Okay, so now we transition to Rick to tell us of Cygnus' best trick. To go to the station without hesitation and an ease that makes Elon sick.
Thank you, Terry. All right. I was told whenever you followed Terry onto stage, you needed to have a gimmick. The only gimmick I could find was this old jacket. So, yes, I was a NASA astronaut for 20 years. I flew several missions to the International Space Station, but about 4 or 5 years ago, I was up there to catch the first orbital Cygnus vehicle. And I love that vehicle so much, I came back down to Earth, and now I've been working for the company. I'm the director of operations. I lead the team that puts the vehicle together, puts it into orbit. In fact, last night at midnight, we were out there loading up all the last-minute science cargo. And the Cygnus is now on top of the Antares. The vehicle's out there. They're getting ready to fuel, and we are out of time. So we are going to get on the buses, and I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca, and we'll talk to all of you guys at the launch site.
No. Sit down. Okay, this is where I need patience. First thing, there are 2 vehicles out here in front. It's a green Subaru and a darker color, not sure what it is. I need it moved, please, immediately, because the buses come right in that area. If not, we've got the town that can actually move it for you, and I don't think y'all want that happening. So real quickly, before you move, there is an order to this, okay? There's an order. Emily Bushy from Orbital. I'm sorry, just kidding. Shoot me. Now, Northrop Grumman, Emily Bushy, will be coming. It's been a long day. Sorry, guys. She will come in and she will announce the groups. Your badges will